Now, everybody, all that I'm hearing from everybody is that you guys have been able to get to the channel. It worked fine, and the videos that are up are fine. Everybody can see them. Is that right? Okay, good. What I'm going to be doing too over the next couple of weeks is posting a couple of the videos from the different modules in the class so that you can have that as a reference too. And a couple of people have suggested a different channel title that I really liked all the suggestions. Running them by the chair of the department, they're not exactly, I guess, in line with the professionalism that they want. So I guess professionalism in an academic sense means a little boring, but that's fine. We know what the channel means. But I think we will need to go through the videos that we post and just make sure that the titles are kind of explain it a little bit, so when anybody in the future going back will look at it and find videos that can actually help them. So the two things that we're going to go over today is, first, I want to do the quiz for Module 4. That quiz, there's going to be a lot of short essay answers for people instead of a lot of true and false. And there are things to make you think about, and so it's going to be really beneficial to go through chapters 5 and 12 of the textbook for that before you take the quiz or as you have it in front of you. As most of the other quizzes up until now, we have been asking for answers that are like directly out of the textbook. This quiz, it's going to be answers, a lot of them are going to be ones that you process from the information you learn through the textbook. So it's a little bit different. Before we go into that, next Friday, we're going to go over the Tools of Artistic Critique, Exercise 3. And I'm going to have a couple volunteers. We're just going to get a few examples. For that exercise, what you need to do is, in class, present your critique of one of your own works that have been done in this class, and also your critique of the work of another student in this class this semester. And the one for yourself of your own work, you can just hold it up and show it on the video monitor when we do this kind of meeting. And whichever piece that you want to pick for the other one, you can go through the discussion board, take one of those photos, email it to me, and I'll put it up on the shared screen, and then you can do your critique. Now, the critique, there are the 4 elements. The first you describe. What's the second one? Starts with an A.
Analyze.
Analyze. What's the third one? Starts with an I.
Interpret.
Excellent. And what's the last one?
Judge.
Yes, absolutely. And it would be really helpful while you guys do this critique to pull up that screen, that page that we have those 4 tools on, and just as you critique, try to answer 1 or 2 of each of those questions. And that's going to make it a lot easier on you. One of the reasons why I want to do this on video is that everybody can learn from each other's as well. All right, does that all make sense to everybody? And if it doesn't, feel free to ask more questions, like in class and things like that. All right, now I'm going to do screen share. We're going to go through the quiz. Let's see, sharing content. All right, can everybody see this?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Now this is a piece of art that is done by one of the other teachers that do the 3D design class. He does a lot of woodwork, and I think it's really, he does a lot of really very interesting stuff. I've seen a couple of his shows. They're a lot of fun to go to. Now this one, you're asked to talk about the answer in a couple sentences. what does delineated forms mean? What are delineated forms? Do you remember that from the last? I talks about it briefly, it hints at it in the last quiz. In this quiz, it goes into it more detailed. Do you remember the question about what is an implied line? Who can define what an implied line is?
A line that kind of appears between the actual physical object, so the light perhaps, and yeah, between an object, sorry.
Well, yeah, when light hits an object, usually when the light goes into shade, there's an implied line there, especially if the edge is sharp. Another implied line has to do with pointing. If you find, have any of you seen a sculpture where it seems to point somewhere? Almost, that's part of human nature. When somebody points, we always look. It almost doesn't matter. So keeping those things in mind, what do you think some of the delineated forms are in this piece? Can anybody describe them?
Okay, wait. I'm not quite clear on what a delineated form is then.
Okay, an implied line is a line that appears to be there.
Oh, so a delineated form and an implied line, they're synonyms?
They're related to each other, but they're not exactly the same thing. The difference is the delineated form is going to have the implied line be apparent. So it's no longer, I guess that's a bad way of saying it's no longer an implied line, it's an actual line. I'm sorry for the confusion. So where would the delineated forms be on this? One of them that I can see right away are the rungs of the two ladders.
Right. And because those are like they're hidden lines, they're implied lines. Okay.
They're lines that are made in the actual sculpture, and the delineated form would actually be those rectangles that are outlined by the rungs.
So the difference between an implied line and delineated form is the term delineated form is used to describe like a sculpture or a piece that has implied lines. Is that right?
Yes, and it also could be lines that are actually present too. So yeah, either way. And the delineated forms in a sculpture with implied lines would be the forms that I start seeing when your imagination starts filling in the lines. Like one of those implied lines was an incomplete line. A lot of sculptures will have drapery and folds where the implied lines are kind of like your mind kind of completes the drapery folds that aren't really there. And those would be delineated lines, for example. In this one, I think it's good. It's a good example of this because those delineated forms are very apparent. One set of delineated forms, like I said, are those rectangles that are formed between the sides of the ladder and the rungs. And I think there's maybe 25 of them, something like that. What's another really apparent delineated form that's outlined by the outside edge of the ladder itself?
Is it like the circles?
Yeah, exactly. It's the circles on both sides. So we don't have the artist coming in and painting or scribing an exact line for us, but the line, it really reads as a line because that's the form of the ladder. Does this kind of sort of make sense to anybody?
So is the delineated form closer to like negative space in 3D then?
It can be, and sometimes it's a delineated form that's the patterning on the surface of the object itself. Like, a jungle gym or a geodesic dome, they're basically the same structure. The jungle gym, you just have the raw metal rungs, and the delineated forms would be all those empty space triangles. But on the geodesic dome, like off by Geneva Road on the west side of the that theater there's a big geodesic dome back there. And those, in that case, the delineated forms of the edges of the triangles, and they make physical triangles. So they're both delineated forms, but one is negative space, like what you're talking about, and the other one is actual object. So it's a way of, when we talk about delineated forms, it's a way of helping us to describe the object that we're seeing so that other people can kind of see what we're seeing. Very obvious delineated form in this picture are those rectangular tiles on the floor. In this case, there's no implied line at all. It's a very obvious line. The grout line makes it very apparent what it is. So in this picture, I see three different delineated forms. One, the obvious rectangle tiles on the floor. One is the matching set of circles that are defined by the styles of the ladders. And the third is those 24 or so rectangles that are of negative space that are outlined by the ladder rungs, and again, the styles of the ladders. Sometimes I know what I'm trying to describe, and sometimes it's pretty obvious why I'm a visual artist instead of a professional writer. But I think as we go through the text, it covers this and gives some more examples to make it a lot more apparent. And I hope it'll help everybody to understand. And what I'd like you to do is, spend some time going over the text over this weekend, and then ask me the questions about it on Tuesday, and we'll go over this some more. All right, I'm going to go on. Does anybody have any questions of clarification about this, or did I help muddy the waters more than enough?
No, that does make a little bit more sense to me.
Okay, because I think your question is really a good one, because sometimes the delineated forms are going to be on the surface of an object, and sometimes they are going to be the negative space in an object, or that's negative space defined by the object. So they can be both. And that's one of the things that can be a little bit frustrating. Sometimes the delineated forms will be formed by implied lines that aren't actually there, that we just imagine. And sometimes they're going to be there, like the struts on a jungle gym. They're going to be made by actual physical things. Now here on question 2, this one we're talking about basically art history as well. What are the two most common rigid materials that artists and sculptors over the years have used in constructing artworks? Now, one thing that I want you to think about right away is we're talking about the most common rigid materials, and there's no time limit on this. We're not talking about since 1940. We're talking about that artists have used since the dawn of time. So right away, that would rule out plastic. So both of those would be wrong or discounted. Now, does anybody know about the history of glass and the use by artists? It first shows up by the Phoenicians, and the Egyptians used it later. It was really big for the Romans, but the Romans treated it the same way that they also treated things like sapphires and rubies. It was considered a jewel. And that's not a very common material to work with. So that rules out this one. So what are we left with?
Metal and wood.
That's right. And if we look over time, wood was used incredibly often for a lot of sculptures and stuff. And if people wanted to get things to last, they would use metal. Now, another thing that we can throw in there would be stone. But since that isn't one of the answers, unless it's coupled with plastic, which we know is not correct, we're left with metal and wood. So metal and wood is going to be the right answer. All right? Now here's the question, and I actually know a couple fiber artists that use this. Fiber arts can be made durable in outdoor conditions by adding a hardening compound. Is that true or false? Do you think that there is a hardening compound that you can add to fiber arts that will make it durable for an outside setting or an outdoor setting?
I'm going to go with true.
You're absolutely right. There are several different kinds of things that you can use, everywhere from wax-based compounds all the way to plastic-based or resin-based compounds. There's a lot of things that you can use that will make those fiber arts more durable, and they can withstand the outdoor environment. One of the simplest things is a naturally occurring sap that you can get off of trees. And if you mix that with carbon from a fire, you can get something that's very similar to tar. And people will use that kind of a compound to make outdoor rigging really stand up to the elements. So the answer for number 3 is absolutely true. Now, I think this goes a bit with what Michael was talking about. We're going to be talking about the negative spaces specifically in this, but the shape of this kind of implied line where the sculpture ends, the artist really didn't draw that line in there, but that line delineates the forms of the negative shapes. So in 2 or 3 sentences, talk about the negative shapes. Where do you see the negative shapes in this Henry Moore sculpture? Anybody? What are negative shapes?
It looks like the space. I mean, I see a figure. So kind of like where the arm is bending into, like maybe what would be the hip. Yeah, both arms really.
Yeah, that's really good. This is an example of negative space, and so is this form right here. It almost looks like a bird's head is a negative space here. Here we have a negative space where that comes into the head form a little bit. And I see, Evan, what you're saying. It does appear to be kind of a human figure. Here, there's also a negative space right here, where we get this frontal plane is defined by these forms here, and they come in front of this plane where I would say it's like the spine almost, and it becomes a negative space in front of that other part of the object. But for the rest of it, it's pretty much this outline. So this is the negative space that shows up in the green of the grass and the green and brown and orange of the trees. Those all serve to create an implied line that goes around this whole object. Can everybody see where my mouse is tracking? And this also in turn creates the delineation of the form. So these are all terms that come together to help us to describe this outline of an object that we're seeing that isn't exactly drawn. It's something that our eye manufactures to help us see the object as being separate from the background. So where else is a negative space? If we call this a knee, where is the negative space around it?
Some underneath it in the grass.
Where else?
And above it as well.
Yeah, exactly. These are the negative spaces. So when you write your 2 to 3 sentences on this, just talk about where are these negative spaces in relation to this object. And just like we just finished talking about, how much different would this object look like if these negative spaces were all filled in? Would it look like this thing at all?
I mean, I guess they were filled in at one point, and then he carved them out. So
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. It would look like just a block, basically. Yeah, you're absolutely right. All right, first code word is millipede. By question 5. All right. Now we're going to do attendance really quick. Alyssa, I have you down. Delane, are you here?
Yes, sorry, I was a little late. I had some issues connecting, but I'm here.
I am very familiar with connecting issues. All right. James, are you here? How about Sage?
Which one?
Gurney or Sagers? I'll take either one or both.
Gurney is here.
Okay. Sage Sagers, are you here? All right. How about Hazel?
I'm here.
Excellent. Hayden? How about Emily? I saw you. You're here. How about Emery? Are you here, Emery?
Me?
You, Emery?
Oh, sorry. I thought you said Emily.
Yeah, you're here. I got you down. All right. How about Brinley? Are you here, Brinley? Cassidy?
Yes, I'm right here.
Which one? Cassidy?
Cassidy, yes.
Excellent. How about Kayana?
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent. Taylor, are you here? Second Sage, are you here? Okay. Michael, I saw you. How about Karen?
Yeah, I'm here.
Excellent. And Keely, you're here, right?
Yeah, I'm here.
Excellent. Evan, you're here. And Hillary, you're here, right?
Yep.
Excellent. All right. I would like to get some more people answering questions. Please, if you're here and you haven't said anything, please throw in your 2 cents on the next couple questions, please. Okay, what is forced perspective and when would an artist use it?
So forced perspective is kind of a way that an artist can configure a piece and put it together that creates almost an optical illusion. And so it makes it seem smaller or larger than it actually is. And so, like, I know that they use this a lot in Disney parks to make like the castle seem bigger because they have a limited amount of space that they can create it with. And so they use this forced perspective to make it seem bigger than it actually is.
Yeah, that's excellent. I've seen them use it in rooms so that the rooms look like they're larger than they actually are. So yeah, very good. Excellent. How would you use it in a sculpture? Any idea? That was an excellent answer, by the way. Anybody want to throw in, how could you use it in a sculpture?
You could use, I don't know, like some foreshortening techniques to make it look like something is longer than it is. I don't know.
Yeah, a really good example. That's excellent. Thank you. A good example of this is Michelangelo when he designed David. It was designed to look like an anatomically exact person, the height of physical beauty from the perspective of a person standing on the ground. And so even though it appears, if you're a living person looking up at it, it looks like it is the ideal proportions, it's not, because the head is significantly bigger than it would be normally, but he had a forced perspective so it would all look appropriate. So yeah, excellent. Those 2 very good insights. Now here's a good question. We're just going to talk about this briefly, and I'd like to see if somebody could say something about each of the 3, because there's not a right answer. All this is I want you to pick one of these 3 sculptures and talk about how it interacts with the space around it. and how it, or just give a brief example of how it does that. So who wants to weigh in on, let's start with B, Brian Draper's Giving of the Water. How does this sculpture interact with the space around it? How does it activate that space?
The one that's on the far right, that's kind of spiky. It makes it look like something is poking through the space around it. It's kind of tearing through the walls or through the space around it.
Yeah, I think that's really good. It feels like it's almost exploding through. Yeah, and it's just made with toothpicks. I think that, yeah, excellent, very good. Anybody want to take a stab at the poor Giving of the Water guy? How is he interacting with the space around him?
I can say, I just feel like I can't really see the picture that well, like what he's holding, but it kind of implies that maybe the figure is like giving something to somebody else. It's like creating like this imaginary scene for somebody to like interact with, I guess, with that space with the statue.
Yeah, I think that's a really good observation. It's almost forcing some sort of imaginary interaction because you want to imagine that he's there giving it to somebody. Yeah, so he's activating the space on like an imaginal level. Very good. How about A? Let's hear from somebody on A. Lit match.
Well, for me, it looks like the steel, it looks like the object is moving in a way. So in that way, it looks like it's interacting with the space around it just because it's moving a little bit.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think it feels almost like it's in the process of falling over, kind of, or coming up and rushing to the right somehow. But I think you're absolutely right. It seems to activate the surrounding space because it's in the process of getting from some point to another point, I think. And I would hate to be the guy or the individual that's like has to sit right on the ground right there because I would feel like it would fall over at any point. Does anybody else get that feeling?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I get feels like more balanced because of like that horizontal line matches the horizon, and then
Yeah, okay.
the vertical line that's kind of diagonal almost matches the line of a tree. So
Right.
it feels like it's tipping over, but it also feels kind of like balanced or like nestled in that little space.
So it like stabilized there. All right,
Yeah.
very good. Yeah, excellent. All right. These are the kind of answers I would like people to write for this. It's again, there's no right or wrong. You just look at this question right here, and whichever one you pick, the toothpicks, the giver of water, or the lit match. Whatever you do, just write 2 sentences about why or how you see it interacting with the space around it or activating that space. So excellent, very good observations. All right, now this is a good one. Refer to your text, but I would like somebody else to answer why you think one reason why wax is most often cast into another material.
Because it melts.
Excellent, yeah. What's another reason? There's actually 3 very distinct reasons. That's a good first one. Somebody who hasn't said anything yet. Sage or Hazel, what's another reason why, other than that it melts, why it's most often wax is most often cast into another material?
I would think because it would seal the other material or like act as a coating.
It is used as a coating, but we're talking specifically about the process of casting is when something is made out of wax, then a cast is made of the wax, and then that cast is used to create something out of another, yet a different material. So yeah, it is used as a coating quite a bit. That is true. It helps to seal. I'm looking for 2 other additional answers. Wax, one thing that Evan pointed out is that it melts. Wax works very easily at a very low melting point. And a lot of wax that sculptors use, you can even warm it up enough with your hands to manipulate it. So it's very easy to manipulate. So that's reason number 2. A third reason, what's a third reason?
Could it?
Sorry, Sage?
I would say people use a casting mold just to kind of get like a perfect, I guess, first set, so they don't have to really mold or touch up much while casting their piece.
Yeah, it is very. Can you imagine how difficult it would be to try to mold that plaster? I mean, all the stress that you go as you're carving away. So yeah, that's a good observation, Kayana. It is. It takes a lot of stress off the artist. It's easier to deal with, I think, than a lot of other materials. And it's also can be a lot less expensive than many materials. So all those things, in any of those 5 reasons we talked about are really good. Just pick one of them for this answer. All right. So you have 5 possibilities. Good observations, guys. Now, this is a material. Plasticity does not necessarily refer to plastic. Actually, plastic got its name as a material because of its original plasticity. Does anybody know, can anybody define what plasticity is?
Isn't it kind of like how easy it is to like stretch it and manipulate it, I guess?
Yeah. That's really good. So what material has been around that artists has used a lot that has one of the highest plasticity ratings? That's very easy to mold, very easy to work with. And this is something that's been around for thousands of years.
Is it clay?
Yeah, absolutely. It is clay. It's been around for thousands of years, and it's one of the easiest materials to work with. But then you can also fire it at different temperatures and make it very permanent. So yeah, the correct answer for number 8 is clay. All right, now this is something that is going to be in the textbook, talked about quite a bit. What is an armature and when would an artist use it? And this follows in directly after our talking about clay and wax as well. What do you see if we use wax or clay trying to make something a little bit larger? What do you see one of the problems are if it's so easy to bend and manipulate that material, those materials? If you start making something out of clay that's like 2 or 3 feet tall and narrow, what's going to be one of the big problems that you can see having with it?
Doesn't stuff like that start to like bend and fall over on its own weight?
Yeah, exactly. So what do you think an armature would be?
Is that like a support?
Right.
To hold it up?
Exactly. An armature is an interior support that you use to help provide extra structure for that thing that you're making with a high plasticity material. So yeah, a simple example of an armature would be just the vertical pipe that an artist uses to put clay on for a bust if they're making a head of something. More advanced, have any of you guys seen Kubo and the Two Strings, that movie?
Yeah, great movie.
Yeah.
It's an excellent example of the stop motion sculptures that the filmmakers used all had armatures to kind of help them hold their position between one camera shot and another. So those are two really good examples of when an armature is used. One to support the structure of a high plasticity material, and another to kind of hold it when you're doing stop motion animation, for example. They're kind of a rigid yet malleable understructure to help support the higher plasticity material that you're working with. Does that make sense to everybody? A yes or no is great.
Yes.
Thank you.
I was also going to say, Tim Burton, I watched this interview. A lot of his artists on his movies get frustrated because his characters are so spindly.
Yeah.
It's hard for them to keep their poses. So they have to use armatures all the time.
Yeah, that's excellent. And a really good example of that is Jack Skellington in Nightmare Before Christmas. Yeah. Now, excellent. Thank you. Now, on this question 10, what we're looking for is, I want you to look at the scale of each of these artworks. See, this is an actual person. Then this is the artwork. Now, on this one, let's say I'm going to move this down a little bit. This right here, this person sitting down, that's the artwork. And these are all the people looking at it. And are you guys familiar with Slinkachu?
Yep.
Yeah.
This is the artwork right here and here. You see the scale? Now, for each of these three scales, what I want you to do is just write a sentence or two about how the scale affects you as a viewer or can affect the impact of the work of art. So we're looking at this. This is larger than life, a monumental scale. This one
Weird baby.
Yeah, exactly. And this is life-sized or figural scale. And then this is the miniature scale. And you can see right away, each of them have a very distinct and different impact on the viewer because of the scale. So on this, we're just going to pick one of them. If any of you just tell me which of these three scales you'd like me to talk about, and I'll give you an example of what I'm looking for one of those three scales. Anybody?
So are we supposed to do them for each three or just pick one?
You'll do write a sentence or two on each of the three scales.
Okay, awesome.
So I'm gonna
the baby.
The baby. Okay, I'll talk about this one. So what I'm looking at is, we look at the question, how do we feel and how will it make us respond? This, we're looking at a very mundane, well, relatively mundane. It's just a baby, and it's done in a very realistic way. But scaling this up so that the baby is like 20 feet long, suddenly I'm really impacted with something that we almost take for granted that we see every day. You know, a newborn. We interact with them so often that we almost ignore them. And this is forcing us to confront this baby, or to deal with this baby, very literally larger than life. And perhaps the artist is asking us, yes, it's to look at the idea that, yes, this is a mundane thing. It's a regular baby, but how important is that baby? This represents somebody that could have a significant impact on the whole world, but also just as a continuation of life. They're important for just that, but they're important for a lot of things that have a lot more impact than just that mundane, everyday, regular baby. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but those are the kinds of observations that we can make as to why this is larger than life. I don't know if that's what the artist's motivation is, but those are the things that I think about when I look at something that's this small that's now imaged 20 feet tall. Does that make a little bit more sense for people?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so don't answer this question until after you go through the text and look at the text where it talks about scale, particularly these chapters 5 and 12. All right? And try to use some of the big words that the authors used in the text, because that always sells it. If you can use your college level vocabulary, it always makes you appear smarter. Now, a couple of people haven't spoken yet. I would like to get your take on this. This is Anthony Gormley's sculpture. Which is the most important element of this? The structure or the skin? By the structure, we're talking about these rigid lines, and the skin, we're talking about the metal that's connecting the lines. I would like one person to talk briefly about both of those answers. I'm sorry, one person talk about structure, one person talk about skin. Who would like to say or tell us why the skin is the most important element of this sculpture? Anybody who hasn't spoken yet?
I'll share for the structure if you.
Yeah, okay, go for it.
Okay, I think this structure would probably be the most important because one, it's going to hold up this monumental scale, and two, I feel like even if you didn't have the skin there, your eyes would automatically connect the shapes. If this structure was there, it would kind of fill in the blanks. So I feel like the structure is more important in that, in both getting the overall shape and then just simply the structure and holding up the piece to create, especially with those long wings, you really need that correct structure.
All right, that's an excellent answer, Brindley. All right, who wants to take the other side and explain why the skin is the most important? Now, this is not intended to be a debate. I'm just looking for an answer on both sides. And Brindley, that was excellent.
Thanks.
Does anybody want to give a stab as to why the skin might be the most important?
I was thinking it could be because like that's how the artist wanted it to look like. So for like it usually comes second, I would think. So that's what the artist wanted it to look like. So you get to see what he had in mind.
All right, so well, in this case, it's a he. Yeah, I think that's really good because it's very easy to see that outline, and with the skin there, isn't it?
Yeah, I would also. Sorry, can I add something as well?
Sure, absolutely.
I think that it just also really unifies it, and like you said, makes it really clear. But also it just like shows the difference in that texture of the structure. It's like a something that is standing out and then something that is more smooth. And it also, oh, there was one more thing that I wanted to say. Sorry, I'm forgetting now. Oh yeah, if there wasn't the skin, then the sculpture may feel unfinished. It would have a lot of empty negative space, which might be intentional, but it could also just look like it's unfinished and just the structure.
All right, that's really good, Karen. I'm sorry. I'm hoping I'm getting the names right because there is a little bit of a delay on the names, and I can't recognize voices.
That's okay. That was Brindley who just said that last comment again. Sorry.
Okay.
But Karen, I think, was the one before that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. But all three of these were really good answers. And so the point of this question is just articulate, just like these three examples, just articulate whichever answer you respond to. You know, if the structure is more important or the skin. The reality is this would not feel complete, I think, without both of them. But I think it's a really good exercise to ask ourselves, well, which would it feel the same or would it still feel complete if one of the two is missing? So whatever your answer is, just articulate it in a couple sentences. And that's all we're looking for, all right? So any other questions about this quiz? So again, on question 10, I'm looking for a sentence or two on each of the three scales. An example would be when we confront something with a monumental scale, we're forced to realize that maybe this object is more important than we've given it credit to be. On a figurative scale or life-size scale, maybe the object is asking us to look at it from a more personal level and try to see ourselves in it. And these are just examples that you don't have to use these examples for your answer. They're just examples off the top of my head. And in this scale, when it's miniature, it really forces us to take a careful and closer look at whatever the thing is, probably more closely than we would otherwise. So, and your answer can be completely different, but that's the kind of thing I'm looking for, just a sentence or two on each of those three scales. And this, we talked about what an armature is. The material of the highest plasticity rating is clay. Just one of those, there are 5 different people gave a reason as to why wax is cast into a different material, and any of those 5 answers are good. And here you could just pick one of those 3 and write down just 2 sentences about how this object activates the space around it. Just like we went through and we talked about that with each of those 3 objects. Now the second code word is banana. And I'll give the third code word right now too, and that's orange. The color, not the fruit. Like it makes any difference, but still, there it is. Okay. The negative space is everything that's not the sculpture. Fiber arts can be made durable by adding a hardening compound. The answer for 2 is metal and wood. And then delineated forms just talk about the circles, the rungs of the ladder, and why or how those are delineated by the sculpture that Adam made. All right, now I'm going to end screen share. Okay, can everybody see me? Oh, my head is almost at the bottom of the screen. There we go. All right. Now, is anybody, I did take a roll. I'm going to do that double check really quick. Is James here? Hayden? Emery? Brindley, you're here.
Yeah, I'm here.
How about Taylor? Sage? All right, we got Sage Gurney, you're here. The other Sage. Okay. All right, now I'm going to put this up tonight, post up tonight. And over the weekend, I'm going to try to get everything graded for you guys so that you'll know where you are. And then we'll go over everything again Tuesday and Thursday next week as to what we're going to be covering on Fridays. Fantastic, really exciting lecture. I'm so pleased everybody stayed awake during all this. Give yourself a big round of applause after we shut everything down so we don't record it. All right, any last questions? All right, you guys have an awesome weekend.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next week.